Thanks so much for being with us here on Atlanta News First Plus. Want to let you know about some breaking news that we are following here on Atlanta News First and Atlanta News First Plus. The father of the UGA player killed in the January crash, Devin Willock. Devin Willock's father is now filing suit against UGA. The suit filed a short time ago, and this regards the crash that killed Devin Willock back in January, along with UJ staffer Chandler LaCroix. The lawsuit was filed in Gwinnett County. It does name not only UGA, but it also names the estate of that staffer Chandler LaCroix, who was driving when the crash happened. Also names former UGA player Jalen Carter, and in addition to that, it even names the owner of the Athens strip club, Toppers International Show Bar, where Carter, LaCroix, and several others with the football program had gathered before the crash. And it comes less than a month after attorneys representing Willock's family had sent the board an ante-litem notice indicating that they may be suing for $2 million for the wrongful death of Devin Willock. Attorneys argue that there was a lack of oversight. That there was a lack of oversight of employees by football team officials, and the document alleged that LaCroix was served alcohol at UGA events while assigned to drive football recruits and families around. We are reaching out to families involved in this case. We've been kind of digging through this lawsuit as well. So we're going to keep following this and bring you updates throughout the day as we learn more. But I also want to bring a very special guest joining us this afternoon. We have Atlanta-based attorney Erica Wilson joining us. Erica, thank you so much. Of course, we always appreciate you coming in and sharing your expertise with us. What's your initial reaction to this lawsuit?
Not really surprised. I am surprised that they did go up on the amount. Initially, with the ante-litem notice, they did state that they were only suing for $2 million, and now we have an additional $38 million, totaling $40 million. And then in addition to that, we do see some additional parties that they have added, including but not limited to Jeep Wrangler, another former UGA player, and the estate of Chandler LaCroix.
So obviously you're a very experienced attorney. Is it typical when you're filing a lawsuit that you just want to sue anybody who could potentially be liable here?
Absolutely. You want to throw everybody in and then let their attorneys decide if they want to file to have them dismissed from the lawsuit. So you can definitely anticipate that now that they have officially filed a lawsuit, that the attorneys for each of the respective parties will be filing to dismiss them as a party to the lawsuit, and the judge can decide whether or not they can be a viable party. But typically you want to throw everybody in, especially the people with the deeper pockets. If you're suing for monetary damages, certainly some parties may not be able to comply with a $40 million lawsuit, but certainly UGA would, and certainly Jeep Wrangler would also be able to satisfy that type of judgment.
And I mean, you have made it clear that if you're a strategic plaintiff's attorney, you're going to sue anyone who could potentially be involved. We did have some people commenting that they were a little bit surprised that Chandler LaCroix's estate would be sued here. Of course, again, Chandler LaCroix was killed in this crash, but she was, she was driving when this crash happened, an employee of the university. What would be the reasoning for that?
Well, many reasons, because for one, she was there, she was driving, and so you certainly can see where the attorneys would try to assign or apportion some of the fault to her, given that she was driving. So you do definitely want to start there, and you have to kind of name her as a party, particularly if you're going to allege that the university is at fault, and they are therefore liable for her actions directly, given that she was an employee of the university, and not only that, she was also driving the vehicle that was provided to her by the university. There are some allegations that even the night of the crash that she attended a UGA-sponsored event, at which point she was served alcohol, and they're alleging that the university was negligent even in the hiring of her and in giving her the vehicle, given that she had some significant driving history prior to that involved her some excessive speeding, I believe is how they characterized it.
Very interesting there. And, we want to point out, of course, Jalen Carter is named in all this, and he's actually serving 12 months probation on charges related to the crash. He was driving on a suspended Florida license when he led LaCroix on that high-speed race through Athens is what the lawsuit is alleging here, that crash happening January 15th. And I want to ask you then about, Carter's culpability here. He's already serving time, probation time, not prison time, for his role in the crash. How does that play into the civil aspect, this lawsuit now arising?
Well, it could play into the civil case, but I believe likely that Carter will probably be one of the first parties to likely be dismissed. Essentially, what they're alleging is that he kind of engaged in this race while he was also intoxicated. He's serving charges that are not necessarily directed to the crash per se, given that he was driving on a suspended license that at the time that all this occurred. But anytime that you have some sort of criminal charges where they have been convicted of any sort of crime, and in a crime, a traffic offense is a crime, that certainly kind of bolsters a civil case. And so certainly, the Wilcox lawyers, family's lawyers will certainly, emphasize the fact that he is currently on probation and that he has been found guilty for driving with a suspended license during the time of the crash.
Yeah, so it's definitely something, an element to look at here. What about the liability of, the strip club? Because the strip club was also named in this.
And typically you will see this anytime you have alcohol involved in a crash. You typically are going to go back to the source and try to see if there's any level of culpability in the owners of the strip club, because they are under an obligation. You cannot continue to serve alcohol to someone if they're visibly intoxicated. And so, they may have some information that have led to them to understanding that they were probably already intoxicated, given that we do now know that LaCroix was provided alcohol prior to it in a UGA sponsored event. So they're likely alleging that they were visibly drunk at the time and that the facility continued to serve them alcohol, in violation of their duty as the proprietor.
But of course, the big fish here, if you will, is the university, UGA. But because they're a state entity, there would be a limit, right, on what could be recovered from UGA. Is that right?
There is a limit, but also you got to remember that they also named Jeep Chrysler as a defendant as well. And they're naming Jeep Chrysler because Jeep provided Carter with the vehicle as part of their promotion of this new, I believe it's a Jeep Tomahawk. And so certainly a corporation like Chrysler would be able to satisfy the $40 million judgment, but they certainly will be limited in what they can seek from UGA.
Yeah, and there's some video of Carter there, again, serving his probation related to this crash. What else should we be watching for as this case unfolds?
Certainly this is a case of first impression where you have this type of incident where you're naming Carter, who wasn't necessarily directly involved in the crash, but tangentially related. So it'd certainly be interested to see if he's going to be released as a party. There's a panoply of issues here. I mean, certainly we have the issues with, the corporation Jeep Chrysler, whether or not they have any culpability, but certainly given that UGA, permeates throughout the state of Georgia, certainly we want to make sure and watch and see what level of culpability that they have had in this young man's death.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess the next question is just kind of steps going forward. What would be the timeline? Because now the defendants would have to answer, right? Answer this complaint.
Absolutely. And so now that it's officially been filed, we don't know if the entities have been served. The timelines usually trigger once the parties have been served. So now that it's been filed, officially filed with the clerk in Gwinnett County, the respective parties will be served, and upon them being served, they'll then have 30 days to respond.
Okay. So they'll have their time to respond, and then next in that process, would then discovery begin, where they start kind of conducting interviews and gathering some information?
You would, but I anticipate with the response will be several motion to dismiss from all of the parties, especially to dismiss the claim as a whole, but certainly to dismiss, the respective parties individually. Again, Jalen Carter, the state of Chandler LaCroix, Jeep Chrysler, those people are tangentially related to the incident at hand, and so certainly you'll see some fights before we even get to the discovery phase to see which parties will actually make it throughout litigation.
That makes sense. Any final thoughts?
This is an interesting case. It's certainly sad. I know that a lot of people are kind of surprised that they're suing the estate of Chandler LaCroix, but these type of things unfortunately happen, and there are legal reasons why you have to kind of name certain parties. Certainly, whether or not the public believes that they are culpable or not. But this will be certainly interesting to kind of see how everything plays out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Attorney Erica Wilson, for joining us with your expertise and analysis. And of course, we're going to continue to follow this story. UGA sued by the father of crash victim